Ola lived in a small village that sat on the edge of a vast, wild forest. The village was simple, with mud huts and thatched roofs. The people of the village farmed, raised animals, and fetched water from the nearby river. The air always smelled of fresh earth, firewood, and the sweet scent of wildflowers that bloomed after the rain. Ola was different from the other children. While they played in the village, she preferred to wander alone into the forest. She loved the sounds of the wind rustling through the trees, the way the birds chirped high in the branches, and the sight of animals moving in the shadows. The forest was a world full of life and mystery, and it was her favorite place to be. Every morning, after helping her mother with chores, Ola would run off to the edge of the village, where the tall trees stood like guardians. Her mother, a stern but loving woman, would always call out after her, "Don't go too far, Ola. There are dangers in the forest." Ola would always nod and promise not to stray too deep, but her curiosity often led her further than she intended. She liked to follow animal tracks, trying to guess which creatures had passed through. Sometimes she found birds' nests or saw monkeys swinging through the trees. She felt at peace in the forest, like it was a place where she truly belonged. But despite her love for the wild, she also felt a deep loneliness. The other children in the village didn't understand her. They thought she was strange for spending so much time in the forest, and they often teased her. Ola didn't mind too much, but sometimes she wished she had a friend who understood her love for nature. One day, as the sun began to dip in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground, Ola heard something strange while she was exploring a part of the forest she hadn't been to before. It was a soft, sad cry, almost like a baby's whimper. Her heart skipped a beat as she stopped in her tracks and listened. The sound was coming from deeper in the forest, behind a thick curtain of bushes. Carefully, Ola pushed through the leaves and stepped into a small, hidden clearing. At first, she saw nothing unusual, but then she spotted movement near a cluster of rocks. There, lying in the shade, was a small lion cub. Ola's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard stories about lions from the village elders, how dangerous they could be, how they were the kings of the wild. But this cub didn't look dangerous. It was small and weak, its golden fur dirty and matted. It looked scared and alone, its little body trembling as it let out another soft cry. Ola knelt down, her eyes wide with wonder. "Where is your mother?" she whispered. But there was no sign of any other lions nearby. She knew she should leave. Her mother and father had always warned her to stay away from wild animals, especially lions, but something about the cub tugged at her heart. It looked so helpless, so vulnerable. She couldn't just leave it there, all alone. Slowly, she reached out her hand. The cub sniffed her fingers, then let out a soft, weak purr. Ola smiled. "You're not so scary," she whispered, gently stroking its fur. The cub nuzzled against her hand, and in that moment, Ola made a decision. She would take care of it. She couldn't leave the poor thing to die alone in the forest. But how could she hide a lion cub from her family? From the whole village? Ola knew she couldn't bring the cub home. If her parents found out, they would surely tell the villagers, and the villagers would be terrified. They might even try to kill the cub. So she decided to hide it. She found an old, abandoned cave not far from the village, hidden behind thick bushes and vines. It was the perfect place to keep the cub safe. Every day, after finishing her chores, she would sneak out to the cave, bringing scraps of meat from home and a small bowl of water. The cub, which she named Leo, quickly grew fond of her. He would purr loudly whenever she arrived, rubbing his head against her legs. At first, Leo was small enough that he didn't need much food, and Ola could easily carry him if she had to. But as the weeks passed, Leo grew bigger and stronger. His paws became large and heavy, and his once small body filled out with muscle. Still, he remained gentle with Ola, always careful not to hurt her. They would spend hours together, playing in the forest. Leo would chase after birds or pounce on leaves, while Ola laughed and clapped her hands. She had never felt happier. Leo wasn't just her secret, he was her friend. The loneliness that had once filled her heart was gone, replaced by the joy of having a companion who understood her love for the wild. But keeping Leo a secret was becoming harder and harder. As he grew, so did his appetite, and Ola found it difficult to steal enough food from her family without raising suspicion. There were also close calls, times when villagers had heard strange noises coming from the forest or seen large paw prints near the river. Ola knew it was only a matter of time before someone discovered her secret. As the weeks passed, Leo continued to grow. His paws were now larger than Ola's hands, and his playful pounces were strong enough to knock over small bushes. He was no longer the small cub she had found, and this made it harder for her to keep him hidden. His roars, though still soft, sometimes echoed through the forest, and his large paw prints were becoming more noticeable near the village. One afternoon, after feeding Leo a small piece of goat meat she had taken from her family's supply, she noticed her mother watching her more closely. "Ola, you've been running off so much lately," her mother said one evening. "Where do you go every day? You disappear for hours." Ola's heart raced. She quickly thought of an excuse. "I just play by the river, Mama. I like to be alone." Her mother frowned, narrowing her eyes. "You've been bringing home less water and food. Are you eating out there?" Ola shook her head, trying to appear casual, but she felt her mother's suspicion growing. "I'm just exploring, Mama. I like the animals and the trees." Her mother sighed but didn't push the issue any further. Ola knew, however, that she would need to be more careful. Her mother was not the only one watching her closely. Some of the villagers had started to talk about strange happenings near the forest. They whispered about hearing strange growls and seeing shadows that looked like lions. One evening, as the sun began to set, Ola overheard two women talking while fetching water at the river. "Do you think the lions are coming closer to the village?" one woman asked nervously. "I've seen paw prints near my farm," the other replied. "We need to be careful. If there's a lion around, it could attack our livestock, or worse, our children." Ola's heart pounded as she carried her water bucket home. She had to be even more secretive about visiting Leo. She couldn't let anyone find out about him. If the villagers knew she was hiding a lion, they would be terrified, and they might want to hurt him. That night, after everyone in her house had fallen asleep, Ola slipped out quietly and ran to the cave where Leo was waiting. He was already much too large to carry, so he walked beside her, his large paws making soft thudding sounds on the dirt. Ola sat beside him, stroking his thick mane. "You have to stay hidden, Leo," she whispered. "The villagers are scared. They can't know about you, not yet." Leo looked at her with his big golden eyes, as if he understood her words. He nuzzled her hand, his warm breath brushing against her skin. Ola smiled, feeling a deep connection with him. He was not just an animal to her. He was her friend, her protector. But she knew their time in secret was running out. A few days later, as Ola was sneaking through the forest to bring Leo his food, she heard voices nearby. Her heart skipped a beat. She ducked behind a tree, her breath shallow as she listened. Two men from the village were walking through the woods, talking in low voices. They were hunters, carrying spears and looking around cautiously. "Something's been killing the goats," one of the men said. "We found 3 dead this week, and the tracks near the bodies, they look like lion tracks." The other man grunted in agreement. "We should warn the village elders. If there's a lion lurking around, we need to hunt it before it attacks someone." Ola pressed her hand against her mouth, fear gripping her. She knew that Leo hadn't hurt any animals in the village, but the villagers were starting to suspect a lion was nearby. If the hunters came any closer, they might find him. She had to move fast. Once the men had passed, Ola raced back to the cave. "Leo, we have to go," she whispered urgently, tugging at his mane. Leo blinked at her, his large amber eyes calm, but he could sense her fear. He stood up and followed her deeper into the forest, away from the cave. Ola found a new hiding spot for Leo, far from the paths the villagers normally took. It was a smaller clearing, surrounded by thick trees and bushes. "You'll be safe here," she told him, though her voice trembled, "but you must stay hidden, okay?" Leo purred softly, nuzzling her cheek as if to reassure her. Ola smiled faintly, but inside, she was worried. How long could she keep this secret? How long before the villagers discovered Leo? As weeks passed, the village seemed to settle back into its routine, though the whispers of a lion in the forest never truly disappeared. The villagers were more cautious, keeping their livestock close and avoiding the deeper parts of the forest where Ola often ventured. Then one day, something far worse than a lion threatened the village. Ola was fetching water by the river when she heard shouts coming from the village. Her heart jumped, and she dropped her bucket, racing back as fast as she could. As she approached, she saw men, strangers, marching through the village, pushing people aside and grabbing whatever they could find. These men were poachers, armed with rifles and spears, and they were taking livestock, crops, and anything of value. Ola hid behind a tree, watching in horror as the poachers shouted at the villagers, demanding more goods. One of them even struck a man who refused to give up his last chicken. Fear spread quickly among the villagers, who were helpless against the armed men. Ola's mind raced. She knew she had to do something, but what? The poachers were too strong, too dangerous. Then an idea flashed in her mind. Leo. Without thinking, she turned and ran toward the forest, her feet pounding against the dirt path. She didn't stop until she reached the clearing where Leo was resting. He stood up when he saw her, his tail flicking as he sensed her urgency. "Leo, I need your help," she panted, grabbing his mane. "There are bad men in the village. They're hurting people. You have to scare them away." Leo tilted his head as if understanding the danger. Without hesitation, he followed her, his large body moving gracefully through the forest. Together, they made their way back to the village, but this time, Ola didn't sneak through the bushes. She stepped boldly into the village square, with Leo walking beside her. The poachers stopped in their tracks the moment they saw the lion. Their faces went pale, their eyes wide with fear. Leo let out a low, rumbling growl, and the sound seemed to shake the ground. The villagers, too, were frozen in shock. The leader of the poachers, a tall man with a scar across his face, raised his rifle, his hands trembling. "Stay back!" he shouted, but his voice cracked with fear. Ola stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Leave my village!" she shouted, her voice strong despite the fear in her chest. "Leo will protect us." Leo bared his teeth, and the poachers took several steps back. The leader hesitated for a moment, glancing between the girl and the lion, before deciding it wasn't worth the risk. He lowered his rifle and signaled to his men. "Let's get out of here," he muttered, his voice filled with fear. Within minutes, the poachers were gone, fleeing toward the horizon, leaving behind everything they had stolen. After the poachers had left, the village was silent. All eyes were on Ola and Leo. The villagers, who had been terrified moments ago, now looked at her with a mix of awe and fear. Her parents rushed toward her, their faces pale. Her mother looked like she was about to faint. "Ola," she whispered, her voice trembling. What is this?" Ola swallowed, her hand resting gently on Leo's back. "This is Leo," she said softly. "I found him in the forest when he was just a cub. I've been taking care of him." Her father's eyes were wide, his hands shaking. "A lion? You've been keeping a lion?" Ola nodded, trying to remain calm. "He's not dangerous. He's my friend. He saved us." For a long moment, no one said anything. The villagers just stared, some whispering among themselves. A few took cautious steps back, as if afraid Leo might suddenly attack. But Leo remained calm, standing quietly beside Ola, his eyes scanning the villagers, but showing no aggression. Then, the village elder, an old woman named Nyakio, stepped forward. She leaned on her staff, her wise eyes studying Leo. "This lion," she said slowly, her voice calm but commanding, "has chosen Ola. He has protected her in the village." Some of the villagers nodded in agreement, though many still looked uneasy. "Maybe the lion was sent by the spirits," one man whispered. Ola's parents exchanged worried glances. They didn't know what to think. They were proud of their daughter for saving the village, but they were also afraid. A lion was a dangerous creature, and having one so close to their home filled them with fear. "Ola," her father said, his voice soft but firm, "this lion, you must keep him away from the village. The people are scared." Ola looked down at Leo, who was sitting calmly beside her, his tail flicking back and forth. "But he's not a danger to us," she insisted, her voice steady. "He saved us today. If we keep him close, he will protect us from any other threats, like those poachers." The villagers murmured among themselves, clearly torn between their fear of a lion and the gratitude they felt for what Leo had done. Nyakio stepped forward again, her wise presence calming the crowd. "We must find a way to coexist. This lion has shown loyalty to Ola. If we can keep our livestock safe and respect the lion's space, perhaps we can learn to live together." Ola's heart raced. Yes, we can build a safe place for him near the edge of the village. I will take care of him and ensure he doesn't harm any animals. We can protect each other." Slowly, the villagers began to nod, though many still eyed Leo warily. Her parents, too, looked conflicted but knew they had little choice. The danger from the poachers was real, and Leo had proven his strength. With the villagers' help, they began to build a secure area for Leo on the edge of the village, using wooden posts and strong fencing to create a large enclosure. Ola helped design the space, ensuring it was comfortable for Leo while also keeping him away from the villagers' livestock. Every day after her chores, she would visit Leo, bringing him fresh meat and spending time playing with him. He grew even more fond of her, nuzzling her and responding to her commands. It wasn't long before Leo became a part of the village life, and the villagers slowly adjusted to his presence. At first, the villagers were cautious. They would watch from a distance as Ola played with Leo, but over time, they began to see that he was not a threat. Children would gather to watch her, amazed by the sight of a lion playing with a girl. Some even began to approach, offering scraps of food, which Ola would let Leo eat from their hands. But there were still some who were not convinced. A few older men grumbled about having a lion so close. What if he turns on her one day? Lions are wild animals, they warned, but the village elders stood firm, reminding everyone of how Leo had saved them. From that day forward, the village learned to embrace Leo. They built a larger enclosure, and Ola became the lion's caretaker. She spent every day with Leo, and the villagers gradually began to see him as a guardian rather than a threat. Children played near the enclosure, and people would bring Leo treats and food. As time passed, the fear that once surrounded a lion living so close to humans transformed into respect and admiration. Life with Leo, Ola, and Leo shared countless adventures in the forest. She taught him tricks, and he delighted in showing off for the villagers. The bond between them grew stronger each day, and Ola found happiness in knowing that she had not only saved Leo, but that he had saved her village in return.